I never thought there would be a day when the son I once held in my arms, the one I sacrificed my whole life for, could treat me like that right in the middle of a family dinner. It started with something very small. I just wanted a little more rice. I spoke softly, as I always did. "Son, could you give me a bit more rice?" I wasn't demanding or complaining. But somehow that simple sentence became the spark that blew everything inside him apart. Michael looked up at me. His eyes made my whole body go cold, not the eyes of a son looking at his mother, but of a stranger annoyed by my presence. Before I could understand what was happening, I saw his hand grab the water glass on the table. In a flash too quick to react, cold water splashed straight into my face. My body jerked back as the chill spread across my skin. I heard the water hit, the ice clatter onto the floor. I sat frozen, unable to speak. Water ran down my collar and soaked my skin, but what hurt most was the silence. No one said a word. Jessica, his wife, let out a weak, awkward laugh, then pretended to wipe the table. My two small grandchildren just sat there, eyes wide confused, scared and curious. Time felt frozen in that moment, and I just sat there soaked, alone, and so ashamed I couldn't lift my head. I didn't cry. I didn't scold him. I only felt something inside me collapse quietly, slowly, beyond repair. I used to believe that no matter how much my son changed, a little love for his mother would remain, but the steel in his eyes told me that love had died long ago. When I stood up, the chair scraped across the wood floor with a long, harsh sound that tore through the silence. I didn't look at anyone. I turned and walked away. Water dripped from my hair onto the floor, each drop cold as the humiliation seeping through my veins. I walked past their eyes, no regret in them, only a cruel indifference. I went to my room and closed the door. My hands, still shaking, touched my cold, wet face. In the mirror, I saw an old woman, drenched and silent, just humiliated by her own son. My chest ached so much I could hardly breathe. It wasn't anger, it was a deep, bottomless disappointment, as if I'd lost not only my child but the meaning of all the years I'd lived for him. In the quiet room, I understood. Sometimes the greatest pain doesn't come from strangers, but from the very child you loved with all your heart. Before I continue, I want you to pause and think, have you ever been hurt by your own family? Often, the deepest wounds don't come from outsiders, but from the people we love most. If you've ever felt that way, stay with me, because what comes next will keep you listening. Please hit subscribe to the Voices of Auntie Tay channel and turn on the bell so you don't miss family drama stories that touch the heart. Each story is a slice of life, a lesson in love, gratitude, and self-respect. And don't forget to comment below, tell me where you're watching from and how you feel when you hear stories like this. Because here, you're not just a viewer, you're part of our family. I sat quietly in my room, my hands still trembling. My hair had dried, but the cold clung to my skin as if it had seeped into my bones. The familiar room felt strange, suffocatingly quiet. I looked around the old wooden wardrobe, the beige curtains, the family photo on the dressing table. Everything was still there, but I realized none of it felt like it belonged to me anymore. In the photo, Michael was smiling. It was taken on his wedding day. I remember it clearly. I cried with happiness, thinking my son had finally found joy and I could rest after so many hard years. I contributed most of the wedding costs, even dipping into my retirement savings so he could have a beautiful ceremony. I wanted him to enter life with pride and respect. But now, looking at that smiling face, all I saw was a stranger with the same cold eyes he'd turned on me tonight. I remembered when he was little thin, clinging to me at the construction site where I worked. I used to carry him home in the rain, our clothes soaked through, still happy because at least he was fed. I did every job I could, cleaning, laundry, selling in the market, anything to send him to school and give him a future. I was proud that, though not rich, I had done my duty as a mother. But maybe, by giving too much, I lost myself. I got used to sacrificing, to enduring. I thought love and patience could hold a family together. Now I understand when kindness isn't respected, it becomes something others exploit. Michael was once a gentle boy who held my hand when he feared the dark. Now he threw water in my face at dinner, in front of his wife and children. I don't know what died inside him, but I know something in me died too, not love but trust. I looked out the window. It was drizzling. Each drop on the porch sounded like the heavy beat of my heart. I asked myself if I had been wrong to do everything for him, until he believed I owed him. Maybe I was too afraid of loneliness, too hungry for love, and forgot that love can't be begged, it must come with respect. I thought of my husband, a gentleman who passed away early. If he were still alive, could he bear this? He used to warn me, "He's grown up, don't spoil him. He'll forget who gave him everything." I laughed it off then, thinking he worried too much. Now I see he was warning me. On the table, the towel I'd used to dry my face was still damp. I picked it up and squeezed it tight. Part of me wanted to believe this was a misunderstanding and that Michael would regret it. But reason told me no, this cruelty wasn't an accident. It was the result of years of quiet contempt. I didn't cry anymore. Maybe my tears had run out along with the years I gave him. In their place was a large, cold emptiness, as if someone had cut out a piece of my heart and taken it away forever. I sat there a long time, staring at the wedding photo. My eyes stopped on Michael's smiling face. I exhaled and whispered, "Son, I don't know who you've become anymore." Outside, the rain grew heavier. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Inside me, I felt it clearly. Tonight would be the last night I believed in unconditional family love. The next morning I woke very early. Pale light slipped through the curtains onto the worn walls. I sat on the edge of the bed, still hollow from the night before. The family photo in front of me looked like a string of broken illusions. I had told myself my son was just tired and stressed, that he needed time to change. But after last night I knew. He no longer saw me as his mother, only as a burden. I stepped out, trying to act normal. Michael sat at the table in a crisp shirt, steam rising from his coffee. He didn't look at me, just glanced coldly. Jessica pretended to be busy on her phone, as if nothing had happened. I tried to say good morning, but my throat closed up. In that familiar kitchen, I felt like an uninvited guest, pushing into someone else's life. Silently, I poured water, hiding my shaking hands. I heard Michael speak to his wife, his voice flat and indifferent. "Remember to lock the pantry. Mom's been eating a lot lately." I froze. Even Jessica looked up at me with a half smirk, half sneer, half pity. The words twisted like a knife. I wasn't hungry. I just wanted a little rice, a little warmth from family. Now even that had become a reason to shame me. I turned away, blinking back tears. Then I heard Michael say, quietly but clear enough, "Sometimes I think we should have sent her to a nursing home earlier." I stood there, stunned. Those words were colder than last night's water. I felt something inside me melt, not from pain, but because my last bit of faith had been crushed. I went back to my room and closed the door gently. All morning I sat by the window watching raindrops fall on the leaves. I remembered my younger years, working 2 jobs so my son could study. I remembered the nights he had a fever, and I didn't sleep, watching over him. I remembered his high test scores and my tears of joy, believing all my sacrifices were worth it. Now I see. I didn't just raise a child. I raised in gratitude. I gave him everything. My time, strength, youth, even my dignity. I stayed quiet when he shouted. I stayed silent when he belittled me. I thought silence was love, a mother's kindness. It wasn't. My silence taught him I was weak, that he could step on me without consequence. I looked at my hands, the hands that once cracked from work, that held him when he was scared, that stroked his hair when he was sad. Now they trembled not from age, but from bitterness. I realized I had lost myself for too long. I had let others, even my son, decide how much respect I deserved. At noon, I heard laughter from the living room. Michael was on the phone bragging about my house and my comfortable life. I gave a thin smile. Everything he had, the house, the car, the bank accounts, came from my sweat. But to him, I was just a shadow of the past. I stood up, opened the wooden cabinet, and took out a small box of old papers. Inside were contracts, savings books, and the house title, all in my name. When I saw owner Helen Parker, my heart thumped. For the first time in years, I remembered I still had rights, not just legal rights, but the right to own my life. I smiled, tired, but determined. Maybe it was time to stop loving blindly and start loving myself. I looked out the window. The rain had stopped. A thin sunlight cut through gray clouds and lit the pile of documents on the table. In that light, I saw a new road opening, the first I would walk without needing anyone's permission. That afternoon, the house was strangely quiet. Michael went to work, Jessica took the kids to lessons. I sat alone in the living room while the last light of day laid a sad gold across the tile floor. I looked around every wall, every object, things I'd saved for, dollar by dollar. Yet I lived here like a boarder. That hurt more than any wound. I opened the box again. Old files, house deeds, savings accounts from my factory days. Each paper was a piece of my life, a witness to years of labor. I turned the pages and saw my name clearly. Helen Parker. I read slowly, as if reading my true identity, the woman I'd forgotten while being a mother, serving my son's happiness. A strange feeling spread in my chest, not anger but clarity. I didn't want to cry or blame anyone anymore. I just wanted fairness, not for money, but to prove to myself I still had value. In the evening, Michael came home and walked past me without a greeting. His eyes were as cold as steel, as if nothing had happened. Jessica glanced at me and looked away, pretending to scroll on her phone. I sat there, quiet, holding a cup of tea. I heard their whispers, half mocking, half dismissive. This time, instead of pain, I felt calm. I knew we had reached the limit. There was nothing left to lose. My love for them had run dry. Only will remained. Late at night, I opened an old notebook I once used for expenses. I listed everything: the house, savings, investments, the car, all in my name. I gave a thin, bitter smile. All these years, they saw me as weak, never knowing that everything they enjoyed still belonged to me. I remembered opening a joint account with Michael. I thought it would teach him responsibility. I never imagined it would become a chain around my neck. But now, that chain could save me. Because in every legal document, final control was still mine. I whispered, "If you think I'm a burden, I'll show you how heavy that burden feels when you lose it." The clock ticked in the quiet room. My heart cooled and hardened like steel after fire. No more tears, no more trembling, only a sharp, cold clarity. The next day, I woke earlier than usual. I ate breakfast alone and brewed strong coffee for myself. When Michael came downstairs, he glanced at me and left without a word. I watched him go, feeling no pain, only distance. When his car left the gate, I returned to the table, took a blank sheet of paper, and wrote the first lines of my plan. I would meet my old bank manager, Mr. Broslas Henderson, who used to call me the most diligent woman on Maple Street. I would confirm all ownership and transfer everything into a private account, locking Michael out. No fights, no blame. With one signature, everything would change. I closed the notebook and placed a hand over my heart. For the first time in years, it beat hard, not from fear, but from strength returning. I lifted my head toward the window. New sunlight broke through the leaves, bright and clean. I knew the weak woman from yesterday was gone. Only a mother remained, clear-eyed, resolute, ready to take back the life that had been stolen piece by piece. That morning the house felt unusually still. I rose early, brewed hot tea, and sat by the window watching pale light filter through the trees. My mind was calm. No anger, no shame, just a cold, clear focus. Today I would start taking everything back. Around 9, I dressed in my neatest clothes, the light blue blouse I used to wear to work, and tucked all my documents into an old leather bag. I stood before the mirror. The same face looked back, wrinkles, age spots, but in my eyes I saw a different woman. No more softness, only the resolve of someone who knows exactly what to do. I called a taxi. When it stopped in front of the bank, I inhaled deeply. The early autumn air smelled of dry leaves and reminded me of all the years I deposited small savings, each amount earned by hunger, skipped meals, and my youth. Today I came to protect it. To protect my life's work. Mr. Henderson, the bank manager who had known me for nearly 20 years, recognized me at once. "Mrs. Helen, long time no see. How are you?" "I'm well," I smiled. "I'm here for something important. I need to verify full ownership of the joint accounts with my son." He was surprised but quickly pulled up the files. When the screen lit up, he leaned in and said gently, "You're still the primary owner, Mrs. Helen. Your son is only an authorized user to withdraw, not a legal owner. If you wish, you can move all funds into a new private account." Numbers appeared clearly on the screen. Everything Michael bragged about and spent came from here. I nodded. "I want to transfer everything to a new account in my name only. and remove all prior access. He paused. Are you sure? More sure than ever, I said calmly. The procedure took about an hour. I signed page after page, firm strokes, no hesitation. Each signature erased an old wound, a moment of contempt, a humiliation. When the final page was stamped, Mr. Henderson smiled. That's it, Mrs. Helen. From now on, it all belongs to you. I thanked him and stepped out into the midday, sunbright and warm. I lifted my head and breathed deep. It felt like a boulder decades old had fallen off my chest. I walked along the old street where a small diner once stood, the one Michael and I used to visit when he was little. I could still see his innocent face, the way he laughed when I bought him our only ice cream of the day. I used to think those memories proved a mother's love would last forever. Now I know, love cannot endure when only one person keeps it alive. That afternoon I came home. Michael sat watching TV, the same arrogant posture. He didn't know his world had just changed. As I passed, he glanced at me and said carelessly, "Did you buy something?" "Next time, ask first. We still have bills to pay." I smiled faintly. "Don't worry, I won't touch your money." He didn't hear the double meaning. I went to my room and closed the door. On the table lay fresh documents, the transfers complete. I ran my hand over them like touching a shield. For the first time in years, I felt real power, not to argue, but to take control, the kind of power they forgot I ever had. I sat and wrote a single line in my journal. Today, I am no longer a humiliated mother. I am Helen Parker, the owner of my fate. When I closed the book, I knew the battle had begun, and I would be the one directing every move. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay still, listening to every sound in the house, the ticking clock, the soft hum of the fridge, and farther away, the steady breathing of the people sleeping peacefully in the house they believed was theirs. I stared up at the ceiling, eyes open in the dark. One thought repeated over and over. It's time. I had taken back control. The accounts, the assets, everything had been moved into my name. But I knew if I stayed, it would only become another loop. They would try to take it back, keep belittling me, and I would return to being the silent, compliant mother. No, I didn't want to spend the rest of my life in that humiliation. I needed to disappear quietly, completely leaving behind nothing but emptiness. At dawn, I opened the closet and took out the old suitcase from my factory days. I wiped the dust off the handle and smiled faintly. It had been a long time since I touched it. I began folding clothes, only the essentials. A few long-sleeve shirts, 2 simple dresses, a warm scarf, a small notebook, and my medicine pouch. On top, I placed a thin photo album with a few pictures of Michael as a child, not because I was still soft-hearted, but because I wanted to keep proof that I once loved truly. When I folded the last shirt, my hands paused. I looked around the room, a place that once felt like rest, now only memory. Every wall, every object seemed to breathe the past. Strangely, I felt no sadness and no regret, only relief, like someone finally opening a prison cell that had been locked for too long. I hid the suitcase back in the closet and locked it. In 2 days, I would go. I had already booked a one-way flight to Lisbon, Portugal. I didn't choose it for luxury, but for peace and distance, far enough that no one would find me. I wanted to start over where no one knew who I was. For the next 2 days, I lived as if nothing had happened. I ate with them, cleaned up, answered briefly when spoken to, and kept a calm face. My silence irritated Jessica. Michael grew dismissive. "Are you sulking again, Mom?" he said lazily. I smiled. "No, I'm resting." He didn't care, and turned away. He didn't know that his indifference was the perfect cover for my plan. Every afternoon I went out for a walk, but in truth I was withdrawing cash at different ATMs, only a few $100s each time to avoid attention. I tucked the money into a cloth pouch inside my suitcase. I also stopped by the post office and mailed a sealed envelope to my lawyer. Inside was a letter for Michael with exact instructions, deliver only 1 week after I left the country. I wanted him to read it when it was already too late. The night before I left, I ate dinner with them one last time. No one noticed my silence. They chatted and laughed. Cutlery clinked. I simply watched, strangely calm. No anger, no hatred, only the certainty of someone about to turn a page. That night, I packed everything. I wrote a single line in my notebook. Tomorrow, I will go. Not because I'm afraid, but because I choose peace. At 4 a.m., I woke up. The house was dark. I pulled out the suitcase and walked softly down the hall. Passing Michael's room, I paused. The door was slightly ajar. I could hear his steady breathing. For a moment, I saw the little boy he once was sleeping in my arms, innocent and safe. I breathed out. "Son, I forgive you, but I won't forget." I opened the door and stepped outside. The cold morning wind hit my face, but I felt warm inside. As the taxi pulled away from the street, I didn't look back. Behind me, the house sank into silence, as if no one had ever lived there. Ahead, dawn was rising, and I knew from that moment on, I was free. On the plane, watching white clouds drift under the wing, I felt a lightness I had never known. Below, the city shrank. The house I had lived in was just a fading dot. I closed my eyes and let the soft engine hum carry away the past. I didn't know what Michael was doing at that moment, but I knew within hours his world would collapse. I pictured that morning him waking up, stretching, going downstairs as smug as ever. Maybe he'd grumble that the coffee wasn't hot enough or scold Jessica for forgetting to wash his shirt. Then, as always, he'd check his phone to look at bank accounts, pay some bills, order something expensive without a thought. Only today, the first message on the screen would read, "Access error, account does not exist." At first, he'd think it was a glitch. He'd try again, and again. After a few minutes, with every login rejected, I could imagine his face furrowed, then pale. Maybe he'd curse and call the bank, still arrogant. "There must be a mistake. I'm the account owner." And the voice on the other end would calmly reply, "I'm sorry, sir. The account is now solely under Mrs. Helen Parker. Your access has been removed." I could see him standing frozen in the living room, heart racing, before he started yelling. He'd rush to the study, open his laptop, check investments, credit cards, and once more, everything gone. When Jessica heard the shouting, she'd run in. "What happened?" Michael would fling his phone onto the table, face white. "My mother. She took everything. She emptied the accounts." Jessica would stare at him, stunned. Then her face would turn cold, tinged with disgust. "You mean your mother's money? Not yours?" That question would be the first knife through his pride. I imagined him tearing the place apart, looking for me, calling my name in panic. "Mom, where are you? You can't do this." But he would hear only perfect silence. My room, empty. The closet, bare. On the dresser, nothing except the note I had promised myself to leave. "You threw water in my face over a bowl of rice. Today I'm only taking back what's mine." I pictured him reading that line, his hands trembling, lips moving without sound. Maybe for the first time in years, he would cry. Not for the money, but because understanding had begun. Jessica would stand behind him, saying nothing. Maybe she would leave, taking the children. I don't wish for that, but I know actions have consequences. He planted contempt in me, and now he reaped the same, only larger and rawer. As for me, high in the sky, I felt neither joy nor triumph, only peace. The peace of someone who has finally set down the last burden, the peace after a storm. I wasn't seeking revenge. I just wanted my own quiet, not the silence of submission, but the silence of freedom. I looked out the window. The sun was flaring at the horizon, warmth spread through my chest. I knew that when this plane landed, I would no longer be the humiliated mother. I would be a woman starting over. Behind me, Michael was learning the biggest lesson of his life: gratitude, and the price of arrogance. And when he finally understood that his power had never been real, I would already be far away, where pain could no longer reach me. 3 days after I left, my lawyer, Mr. Daniel Brooks, sent the letter to Michael's address. On the envelope were only a few handwritten words. "To my son read when you're truly ready." I knew that by the time he opened it, he would have felt everything: confusion, rage, then collapse. But what I left was not reproach, it was a final lesson. The letter said, "Michael, by the time you read this, you probably hate me. You think I'm cruel, vengeful, that I want you to suffer. No, my son, I didn't do this for revenge, but to restore fairness. I raised you with love, but you treated that kindness as obligation. I stayed silent, thinking silence would keep the peace, but silence only taught you that I was weak. The night you threw water in my face, It wasn't just my clothes that were soaked. I realized I had been erased from my own home. You didn't just hurt a mother, you insulted a human being. I don't hate you anymore. I chose to leave because I deserve to live the rest of my life in peace, where no one sees love as a burden. Below that, I wrote one last line. I take no hatred with me, only self-respect. If one day you truly understand my worth, you'll know I never disappeared. I just stopped staying where you could hurt me again. When he read those words, I believed Michael would understand, not right away, but sooner or later. Even silence has its own voice. In Lisbon, I rented a small apartment facing the sea. Every morning I sat on the balcony, listening to the waves and the smell of coffee in the wind. I learned to move slowly, cook simple breakfasts, walk through the little market, and sometimes chat with my Portuguese landlady about flowers and dinner. At first, I felt empty. Some nights, I still dreamed of Michael's face, the little boy running in the garden calling, "Mom, look at me," and I woke with a wet pillow. But unlike before, those tears didn't carry pain. They felt like release. I began writing in my journal again. Each day I wrote a few short lines. Today I walked to the beach. Windy but beautiful. I smiled not for anyone else, but for myself. Once, I received an email from the bank. Your accounts are secure. No one but you has access. I stared at that line for a long time. Not because of the money, but because it reminded me at last, everything belongs to me, my assets, my dignity, my life. One afternoon, I sat on a bench by the water and watched the sunset. Orange light spread across the sea, glittering like thousands of shards of glass joined together. I let the fine sand slip through my fingers. In that moment, I finally understood. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's refusing to let pain control you. I closed my eyes and whispered, I forgive you, Michael. Not because you deserve it, but because I need peace. That night, I wrote another letter, one I didn't send, just tucked into my journal. If there is another life, I would still choose to be your mother, but I would teach you that kindness is not the same as submission. And that when you hurt the person who loves you most, you also destroy the best part of yourself. I folded the letter and slipped it between the pages, then smiled softly. Outside, the waves kept tapping the shore. The city glittered in the night, and I realized freedom is not leaving a place. It's no longer living inside your pain. That night, for the first time in years, I slept deeply. No dreams, no worry, no twisting ache in my chest. Only pure peace, the final reward for a mother who walked the whole road of hurt and finally found herself again. The first weeks in Lisbon passed slowly, like music without words. I grew used to the rhythm, here narrow cobblestone streets, cafes tucked under red tile roofs, the lilting sound of Portuguese. In the mornings I rose early, opened the window to let the sea wind and salt and coffee mingling gently. I brewed tea and watched the sun rise in the distance. For the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. No cruel words, no sighs of contempt. I lived alone, but I wasn't lonely. I felt each heartbeat steady, meaningful. I walked along the coast, watched children play, listened to a guitar on a corner, and smiled. Every sound, every breeze reminded me, I had escaped the darkness. Life doesn't end at pain, it begins again from it. One morning at the market I met Maria, an older flower seller with a gentle smile. She asked where I was from. I said, I came from far away to learn how to live again. She pressed a sprig of purple lavender into my hand. A woman who knows she deserves peace will always find it, she said. Simple words, but they sank deep. I put the sprig in a small vase on my table. Each time I saw it, I remembered forgiving others only matters when you've learned to love yourself again. Time rolled on. I wrote more. My journal filled with small letters about new days and warm strangers. I wrote about the old days too, not to hate, but to close the chapter. Each line was a way to heal. I didn't avoid the past, but I refused to be trapped by it. Sometimes I heard news of Michael from acquaintances. They said his work had fallen apart. Jessica left with the children. At first my heart pinched, but only for a moment. I didn't wish him pain. I only hoped he would learn the lesson life had handed back. Loss is often the only way to learn to cherish what once was. One afternoon I sat in a cafe near the sea as La Vie en Rose drifted from an old speaker. The tender melody made me cry, but not from sadness. I cried because I realized that after everything, I could still feel beauty. I could still be moved by a song, a sunbeam, a smile. I was still alive, not just existing, but living. That night I wrote, I was once insulted, despised, forgotten. But now I am grateful, because those things taught me to stand up. Without long nights, I would never know how precious the dawn is. I closed my journal, turned off the light, and stepped onto the balcony. The sea shimmered under the moon, the breeze ran through my hair. I lifted my face and smiled. No one controlled my life anymore. No one could make me small. I learned that peace doesn't come from being loved, it comes from loving yourself properly. The next day I sent a short note to Daniel, my lawyer. If Michael reaches out, please tell him I'm safe, and that I hope one day he learns to live with gratitude. Simon, I didn't wait for a reply or hope to meet again. Some relationships don't end in hatred, but in the quiet of two people whose bond has run its course. In the afternoon I walked the shoreline again. The waves kept a steady rhythm, one after another like a lullaby from time itself. I breathed deeply, let the wind pass through my sleeves, and smiled softly. Because after all the hurt, after the losses, I finally had what I'd been seeking for years, a life that belongs to me. A year after leaving the old house, I was completely different. I still woke early out of habit, but not out of duty, not to cook for anyone. I made peppermint tea, opened the window, and let the sea wind fill my room. The waves and the gulls became the gentle soundtrack of freedom. I no longer counted time by tears, but by moments of peace. I learned to speak to myself not with blame, but with kindness. I reminded myself, Helen, people can lose everything, money, homes, even family, but never lose your self-respect. Each time I said it, my heart felt lighter, like a breeze blowing across a lavender field. Sometimes I watched mothers and children on the street sons guiding their mothers across the road, a mother beaming over a small bouquet her child bought, and my heart tightened a little. I wasn't jealous, just briefly sad. I understood that not everyone is loved the right way, and not all bonds survive the years. But I also understood, when love turns into contempt, leaving is the last loving act for yourself. One April afternoon, reading at my usual cafe, Daniel called. His voice was low and gentle. Mrs. Helen, I received a letter from Michael. He asked me to forward it to you. I was silent for a few seconds, my heart sinking. Part of me wanted to refuse. Another part, the mother still wanted to hear. I nodded. Send it, Daniel. I'll read it, but only once. 2 days later, the envelope arrived. I sat by the window, hands trembling as I tore the thin paper. The handwriting was familiar, hurried, messy, but sincere. Mom, I don't know where to start. Since you left, everything in my life has fallen apart. I lost my job, lost the house, and Jessica left. I hated you so much I couldn't breathe. But then I read the old papers and the lines you wrote, and I understood you didn't take anything from me. You took back what I never learned to value. Now, sitting in a tiny rental, I finally understand what it feels like to be looked down on. I know how you felt when your own son called you a burden. I'm not asking you to come back. I just want you to know I'm sorry. If I can ask one thing, it's to say these words, I'm sorry. I hope you're at peace. P.F.I. I folded the letter and pressed it to my chest, eyes closed. My tears fell. But this time they weren't bitter. They were warm and clear, like rain after drought. I knew the letter was the closing of our story, not to reconnect, but to end the old chapter with a late understanding. That evening, I wrote back to Michael with only one line. I am at peace, and I hope you learn to be at peace too. Live well, that's the only way to make amends with yourself. 1. I sent it through Daniel, with no return address. I didn't expect a reply. Some relationships end with an unspoken forgiveness. After that, I kept living simply. I joined a small cooking class with neighbors, planted more flowers on the balcony, and sometimes donated to orphans' children, with no arms to hold them when they're wrong, no one to teach them gratitude. I did it not to make up for anything, but to close my motherhood journey with one gentle deed. On a weekend evening, I sat by the sea as sunset gilded the waves. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and smiled. Inside, I heard my own voice whisper, "At last, you've learned what I always hoped, that respect is the highest form of love." I opened my eyes and looked to the horizon. The sun was setting, but I knew a new sunrise in my life was beginning. Thank you for listening to this emotional family drama story. If my story touched your heart, please hit like and subscribe to Voices of Auntie Tay so you don't miss the next episode where every chapter holds a deep lesson about family, hurt, and the power of self-respect. Leave a comment with your thoughts or share your own story. Here, every family drama story is a reminder that love is never weakness. It's the strength that helps us stand up and begin again.